Ready,
All
Kevin?
right. Well, we want to welcome all of you today to our next installment of the Port Aransas Nature Series. Um, and our topic today is palm maintenance for the coast. And we're very fortunate today to have Ginger Easton Smith, who is the Ag and Natural Resources Agent in Aransas County. And she's here and she always does an excellent job talking about palms. So please welcome Ginger Easton Smith.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to get my, let's see. Give me a second here to get groovy. Okay. So, as Kevin said, I'm going to talk about palms. These are some beautiful palms you may recognize at A&M Corpus Christi. And these are sort of the general areas I'm going to talk about: fertilizing, mulching, pruning, insects, and disease. Sort of an overview. One of the things we want to consider when growing palms is if there's enough space. You can see in this picture there's space down here, but there wasn't space up for the leaves to grow. So we got to think about the space of the whole tree. If there's enough sunlight, and having excellent drainage is critical. And the size of a tree can be pretty surprising. This is a Texas Forest Service graphic, which is great. It's off of their Texas Forest Service site. But you think of a small tree being about 20 feet, and look there on the far left, that is twice as tall as a person, almost. I mean, sorry, more than twice as tall. And look at the palm on the far right, 70 feet. And some of our fan palms get that big. That is massive. So we need to think about the mature size of a tree. Okay, and then moving on to fertilizer. What do those numbers stand for on the bag? I didn't hear what you said, but that's okay. They stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and they're always in this order, no matter what the fertilizer product is. It might give you more information than that, but it is always going to tell you the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and those numbers are percentage by weight. So this package has 18% of the weight is nitrogen, 24% is phosphorus, and 6% is potassium. So that only adds up to 48. That means that 52% of that bag is inert ingredients. It's basically filler so that it's easier to spread it over the area. Sometimes you got to look a little bit hard to find those numbers. They used to always be on the front of the bag, but sometimes you got to turn the bag over and look to find it. But it will be on there. If the fertilizer doesn't have all three of those nutrients, then it'll have a 0 in the place of the nutrient it does not have. It also lists what portion of the fertilizer is slow release, and hopefully you can see on the slide here to the right that a portion of it is polymer coated urea, sulfur coated urea. 16.3% is slowly available controlled release. So that's important to know, because you don't want the fertilizer to all be available at once, because it is going to leach out of the soil beyond the root zone and possibly get into our waters, and we don't want that. So it's always good to have the more slow release, the better. Fertilizer can be organic, conventional, or natural. Compost is a form of fertilizer, and it's always better to apply small amounts more frequently than to apply a lot occasionally. And when you're doing maintenance for your job, you really have to consider your labor inputs, I know. So in that case, it's probably better to use a fertilizer that is primarily slow release. So you can put more fertilizer on. It's going to last several months. You don't have to come back to fertilize it for 2 to 3 months, but you're not getting a lot of leaching. Okay, here's an example of a, well, it's listed as a lawn fertilizer, 15-5-10. Just wanted to show you some examples. 4-3-4, this one is an organic fertilizer. And just because it has the word organic or natural does not necessarily mean that it is organically approved. You need to look for that OMRI listing. On the bottom, there's the logo, the circle. That's OMRI, and that stands for Organic Materials Review Institute. It's got that OMRI logo, you know that it is organic material, and that it is approved for organic production, if that's your interest. Liquid fertilizer also has the 3 numbers. It's a little harder to see on this ironite, but it's up there right under the title, 701. So it has no phosphorus and only 1% potassium, but it's got 7% nitrogen, and it also has iron in it. It has the percentage there. I think it says 1% iron. Okay, for palms, we're looking for a ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are always abbreviated as NPK. And do not ask me why K stands for potassium. I have no idea, but it's NPK always. So for palms, we're looking for a ratio of 3 parts nitrogen, 1 part phosphorus, and 3 parts potassium. But we also want something that has magnesium, which is abbreviated Mg, and manganese, which is abbreviated Mn, as well as some of the other minor nutrients. It's really important for palms. Okay, this is again about the Organic Materials Review Institute, or OMRI, and you can look up their website and find a lot of different products that they have listed. You can search by, if you're looking for a source of potassium, you can search what do they have that's listed, that's OMRI listed. You might find green sand or some sort of potassium, sorry, I forgot the name of it, magnesium and potassium. But anyway, you can search that. It's a great website. Okay, you want the fertilizer distributed evenly from about 1 foot out from the trunk to beyond the drip zone. As much of that area as you can afford to cover, basically. You don't want it touching the trunk, and you don't need it right up close to the trunk because the roots there are not really going to take it up. And then you want to water it in so it goes to about 6 inches deep, which is, you know, where the most of the roots are going to be. So that'll take generally about ½ inch of water. Don't fertilize the driveway. I have tried this and it doesn't work. It doesn't grow, and it is not good for our bays and estuaries because that fertilizer runs down the road or the concrete driveway or the sidewalk, and it gets into the gutter and it goes out into the bays, and that's a very bad thing. Okay, iron is the most common nutrient deficiency that we find, micronutrient deficiency that we find in our soils, especially in alkaline soils like we have all along the coast where there's sand. It's almost always very alkaline. Frequently in Rockport, where I am, the pH tests, soil tests we get back, the pH comes around 7.5 to 8.2. And if you look on this chart, it shows the relative availability of different nutrients at different pHs. So go across the top and get to 7.5. And then as you follow it down where the bars are wide, those nutrients, if they're in the soil, are readily available for the plant to take up. So the major nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium, are all pretty easy for plants to take up when the pH is about 7.5, which is pretty alkaline. But the minor nutrients, except for molybdenum, become less and less available for the plant to take up as the pH goes up. So in our general pH range, all those minor nutrients except molybdenum are going to be hard for the plant to take up, to get it out of the soil. So even if you've applied it on the soil, it's hard for it to take up. And that's one of the reasons that we often have a iron deficiency in our soils, and sometimes those minor nutrients have to be added foliarly. So they're taken up through the leaves, or you might need to apply a little extra because it's not all going to be taken up. Okay, mulch. Mulch is a great thing. I'd recommend adding a layer 2 to 4 inches deep of an organic material, like wood chips or bark. We want to avoid rocks just because they hold so much heat. And as we were discussing, it's hot here. You want to replace it as it decomposes and keep it at least 6 inches away from the trunk to avoid rotting of the trunk. On the right, the mulch is applied pretty nicely. It's not 6 inches away from the trunk, but it's not piled up on the trunk either. The bigger the circle, the better, but you can see that this circle goes from concrete to concrete on either side of the trunk. So that's pretty good. The one on the left, the little small tree, the mulch is piled up on top of the trunk, touching the trunk, and it's going to rot it over time. So some of the purposes of mulch are moisture retention. That's a huge one. Weed control, that's another biggie. The temperature moderation of the soil. Addition of organic matter. As you add and replenish that organic mulch every year, some of it's going to decompose and go away, but some of it is going to work down into the sand. As a matter of fact, it kind of disappears, gets sucked down into the sand, but it's improving the soil, and it's making that sand able to hold more nutrients and also more moisture. So it's a great thing. Oh, and then there's trunk rotting, except we really don't want to do trunk rotting, but that's what happens when mulch gets piled up on the trunk. It's the same effect as if you plant too deep. Because you're watering your trees maybe fairly regularly, at least when they're young, the mulch is going to stay wet, so you're going to have constant moisture against the trunk. And since it's an organic material, it is going to decompose and it's going to produce heat. And that is like a double whammy for damage of the bark. I mean, we don't exactly have bark on palms, but you know, the outer layer that is like bark. So did I mention that you should keep the mulch away from the trunk? Okay, don't be a volcano mulcher. People do this, I know, because they want to do a great job and have a lot of moisture retention and weed control, but it's very bad for the plant. So what is different about palms from other trees? Well, palms are monocots like grass is, and most other trees are dicots. And their vascular system is extremely different from each other. The palms is on the left. The palm is on the left. It's a cross section of the trunk. And each one of those little dark circles is a vascular bundle. So it has its xylem and phloem together in every one of those spots. So that is where the water is moving up the tree from the roots through the xylem and into the tree. It's producing photosynthetates, which are moving down through the phloem into the roots to feed the tree. On the right, the regular tree, what we think of as a regular tree, like an oak tree or something, it has its vascular bundles arranged around the circumference of the trunk. So instead of having all mixed up together throughout like the palm, they are only in the outer layer, just under the bark. It's the same with the nutrients and the water moving up and down, but they only do it around the edge there. And a palm tree only has one crown or one growing point for most palms. There are a few clumping palms that's different, but almost all the palms that we grow around here, it's just got one crown, one growing point, and if that dies, the whole plant dies. Whereas with a regular tree, you can cut the top off, it looks really ugly, and it's stressful for the tree, but it can grow back from numerous spots. And here's a tree that didn't make it, and you know, the growing point died and the whole tree is now dead. Okay, palms, just like every other tree in the world, should not be planted too deeply. Their roots are different because they all emerge from the trunk, from one zone, the root initiation zone. They don't branch off the roots like an oak tree root will. And if they're planted too deeply, if you can't see that swelling, then the plant is not going to be as healthy as it could be, and over time, it could even die. Another thing that's different about palms is that they're mostly subtropical and tropical. So even though fall is the best time to plant most things around South Texas, palms should be planted in the spring and summer, because once the temperature of the soil gets below 65, the roots are really not going to grow. They're just going to sit there. So plant your palms in the spring and summer, and plant your other trees in the fall. A lot of the roots are going to die back when you transplant a palm, especially if you have dug it up out of the ground as opposed to it being in a pot. And as I said, they all grow from that one zone. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay, and nutrient requirements are different from regular trees. I did mention this a little bit already, that for palms, we're looking for either a 3:1:3 or 2:1:3 ratio of nitrogen, potassium, and nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, plus we want some magnesium in there. For other trees, a 2:1:1 or 3:1:1 ratio is usually recommended. So that might be like a 20-10-10, for example, or 30-10-10. That would be 30-10-10 would be a 3:1:1 ratio. So palms require more potassium than other trees, more magnesium, and a lot of times more minor nutrients than a lot of other trees. So here's an example of a palm food. And you can see the ratio, 12-4-12. I showed this before, but we could talk about it a little more this time. So it's got 12% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, and 12% potassium. And then it's got 2.75% calcium, 5% magnesium, which is, you know, quite a bit, 8% sulfur, and then it's got minor nutrients as well. And this is specifically formulated for palms. And that's what I would recommend for palms, is getting a fertilizer that is specifically formulated for palms. It'll make a big difference. And this is just sort of an idea of how much you might apply per application, a couple times a year for different sizes of palms. But you would go by the label, of course. Back to this one, it does have directions for landscape palms. I think it says 1 cup per 3 foot of height for palms in the landscape. Okay, I mentioned that slow release fertilizers are preferred by plants because they're getting food over time instead of like a big dose and then nothing. And definitely for the, they're preferred by the environment, or it's better for the environment, I should say. And you want to apply the fertilizer when the plants are most actively growing. Okay, so potassium deficiency. This is the most common and the most serious nutritional disorder in palms that we see in South Texas and in lots of other places. And the symptoms show up first on the oldest leaves and then moves to the newer leaves. So the potassium gets sucked by the plant out of the older leaves into the growing tip. And that's why the deficiency shows up first in the older leaves. So it looks like this, where the older leaves look just kind of, they have a little bit of a sickly pale yellow look to them. And the new leaves are nice and green. This is pretty severe symptom, but if you hold those leaves up to the light, you can really see that it's not that the whole leaf is yellow, but that there's all these little dots, these little translucent spots that are yellow. And as they grow together more and more, as it gets more severe, then the whole leaf starts looking yellow. This also kind of looks like a disease. Certainly the one on the left, it would be easy to confuse that with a disease. But if you see it on the older leaves first, that is one of the sure signs of potassium deficiency. And that's not just for palms, it's for all plants that you see it first on the older leaves, but it's extremely common on palms. And it affects all the species, but especially it's bad in a lot of the ones that we grow, like Mexican fan palm, queen palm, date palm, and pygmy date, and date hybrids. And this tree is certainly showing potassium deficiency. If you're applying a lot of potassium, though, sometimes you can get, it can cause a magnesium deficiency. This is a chemistry lesson that I don't explain, so I won't go into it. But anyway, it needs to be balanced. So that, again, is another reason to use a fertilizer that is formulated for palms. This is a pretty severe example on the right. The leaves of a pygmy date palm or dwarf date or phoenix palm. It goes, Phoenix roebelenii, goes by all those names and more. But first you have the older leaves turning yellow, and then you get this dieback from the tips of the older leaves. So it'll go from the tips of each leaflet towards the main rim, and it'll also go, sorry, the main vein, and it'll also go from the tip of the leaf towards the trunk. And then on the left, of course, is what we're wanting to see, healthy palm. It can get so bad that the canopy is reduced in size, and then the trunk diameter starts getting narrower and narrow as it goes up. It's called pencil pointing, and the new leaves come out small. They might be frizzled or sort of shredded looking, or come out yellow, and it can actually kill the palm if it doesn't get the potassium it needs. This is just to show you the difference in nitrogen deficiency and potassium deficiency. Again, potassium deficiency is on the older leaves, and nitrogen deficiency is a pale yellow, or a yellowing of the leaves, and it's not in spots. So if you hold the leaf up to the light, you're not going to see a bunch of little yellow spots. You're just going to see sort of a general yellowing of the plant, and it occurs on all the leaves, younger and older, but probably primarily or first on the youngest leaves. Are there any questions so far?
I've been answering There's haven't been that many, but I've been answering them as we go.
Okay.
Actually, Colleen just asked a question. How quickly will you see improvement after fertilizing?
Oh, that's really hard to say because it depends on how severe the deficiency is, but you should start seeing it within maybe 10 days, week to 10 days. And you need to keep applying it, you know, according to what the label says. Again, of course, depending on how deficient it is. Okay, raise your hand if you think we have any native palms. Oh, you're right, we do. The sable palms that we have in Texas are native. They're native to Texas. You know, palms don't really know about state lines or borders, so some are native to a larger area, like into the north part of Mexico and maybe neighboring states. But Texas sable is a beautiful tree. It can get up to 50 feet tall though, so that is really tall, but it is fairly slow growing. It has moderate water needs, and it can tolerate salty soil or sea spray even. It's got large fan-shaped leaves, and it does not have spines on the stalk. So that is one way to help identify it, but also a wonderful thing about it, if you've ever been bitten by a Washington palm spine, and I'm sure you have, then you know how nice a thing it is to not have spines on the leaves. And sable palms rarely show that potassium deficiency because they are native. They are adapted to our soil, or they are not just adapted to it, that is their native soil. So they are not going to show those symptoms as much. They either don't need as much potassium, or they are able to take it up better than other palm trees that are not native to our area. Again, it's got this beautiful trunk. I just love this plant. So that was the sable Mexicana or Texana, I think. Oh boy, I pushed all the wrong buttons now. Okay. The sable minor is another one of our native palms. A good thing I went back. Did I mention that you should not put mulch on the trunk? This is also a graphic from the Texas Forest Service website. You need to check that out if you haven't. Okay, here's the Texas dwarf palmetto or bush palmetto, sable minor, native to Texas and the southeast US. It likes wet spots, but it's very drought tolerant also. It only gets up to about 9 or 10 feet tall. And often you don't even see a trunk on it. It's just all the fronds coming up. They look like they're just coming up from the soil. But if it sits in water for a while, if it's growing in standing water, then it will develop a trunk, but it's still not going to get very tall. It's a great landscape plant, as well as the Texas sable, and great in areas, you know, where you don't have as much space. Another sable palm is the cabbage palm or Florida sable. Also no spines on the leaves, 30 to 8 feet tall, and this is the state tree of Florida. Another beautiful palm. The queen palm, this is fairly common in our area, and when I looked for a picture of it, when I looked on the web, I found this picture of when it snowed in Corpus Christi. Not right after Harvey, but the time before, in I think 2000 or something, before I was here. And this palm will get to 50 feet tall. And it is not a fan palm. It has leaves that are like a feather. California fan palm is very common and very well adapted here, 40 to 60 feet tall. It's a slow grower also. It has a fatter trunk than the Mexican fan palm. It does not like to be wet. It needs dry conditions, but it tolerates salt spray and salty soil, and it's relatively cold tolerant. And the sables, being native, of course, are are also cold tolerant and heat tolerant. Okay, the Mexican fan palm is the other very common fan palm that is grown here. And they're commonly about 50 feet tall, but they can reach 80 feet tall. And they get this skinnier trunk as they get taller. Date palms are pretty common here. This is in Rockport on Fulton Beach Road. You can see this one needs a little more water and probably some fertilizer, but they are very, very drought tolerant and a very pretty tree. And Mediterranean fan palm or Mediterranean palm, this is also used, I think, landscaping more around businesses. Foxtail palm, this one is not as cold tolerant as the other ones are, and we had a number of them in Aransas County that died out in in some of the recent freezes about 8 or 10 years ago. I hardly see any of these around town now. Okay, and when is a palm not a palm? Okay, when it's a cycad or sago palm, we always call it sago palm, but it is really not a palm. And so it doesn't have those, excuse me, it doesn't have those problems with potassium deficiency that a palm has. It's very hardy, tough plant. I think the best way you can cause problems for it is to give it too much attention, especially too much water. Just leave it alone and it will grow, and it'll be less likely to get cycad scale if it's not overwatered. Also, ponytail palms is another plant we always call a palm that is not a palm. It doesn't have issues with potassium deficiency either, and it has that fat bulb at the base of the trunk that can hold a lot of water. So it needs to be watered thoroughly once in a great while if we don't get rain. Okay, I'm going to move on to pruning. These were two beautiful palms in Rockport. One of them got busted off in Hurricane Harvey, but the other one just got pruned to oblivion until it died. Okay, here's some good reasons to prune. To remove hiding places for rats and other little critters that you may not want running around. To maybe reduce the potential of fire, potential hazards like fire. You might want to cut off the flowers or the seeds because it can be a hazard if they're on the sidewalk, or you could have seeds sprouting all over the place. If you need, if you can't see well at an intersection or something, in a case of safety, you might need to prune a palm. That might be a good reason, or to decrease damage to structures or utility lines, things like that, from falling or blown fronds. But those are the only good reasons just about to prune a palm. There's a lot more rules about, or a lot of reasons not to prune a palm. I took this picture yesterday. These palms are crying. Can you hear them? They hardly have anything left to produce food for themselves with. So don't prune a palm unless you really need to, and don't prune off green or even half green fronds. I know sometimes palms are over pruned because it's expensive to get a lift to get up there and prune them, but these weren't even very tall anyway. But over time, it's going to weaken the palm and it's possibly going to die. It's really better to spend more money to prune them a little more frequently and take a little less off, and keep it healthy. And don't ever prune a palm that is showing potassium deficiency, because it's just going to make the deficiency worse. Get it back into shape with some potassium, and then prune off the old ones. Unless they're brown and dry, then you can prune them off. Don't prune past the horizontal, and I'll explain what I mean. And of course, don't ever top a palm unless you're done with it. Leave any healthy frond, and by that I really just mean anything that's showing green, when possible. Take them off if they're brown and dry, but otherwise leave them on if you can, because they are producing potassium and other photosynthates. Sorry, they're not producing potassium. They are photosynthesizing and using the potassium to produce photosynthates. So palms don't have a lot of fronds, so don't cut them off if you don't have to. And if you do have to, which I know sometimes you do, don't prune past the horizontal. Means the bottom of the frond should be a straight line that is horizontal to the ground. Don't prune them up into a V shape. And don't prune them just because they're drooping. That doesn't mean they have to come down. So the palm on the right is pruned into a V shape. It's going to get thinner and thinner over time as if they keep pruning it like that. The one on the left is great. Probably wasn't even pruned. Probably the leaves just fall down when they're dry. So we want to prune no fronds before their time. It drains valuable nutrients from the tree and makes the deficiency worse if there's potassium deficiency. As I already mentioned, they don't have that many leaves to begin with. And it also opens up the canopy, so it's not the new sheath, the only growing point, is not as protected from wind and cold. Here's another palm around town here that is just severely pruned. And it doesn't even look nice. I mean, to me, this looks beautiful, but the other one doesn't. Ideally, you want to keep the natural round shape. Just take off the dead stuff, seeds if you need to. Just take off what you really have to and leave the rest and let it be beautiful as nature intended it to be. It's okay to leave the dry ones. There's no advantage to the tree to taking them off, but if you don't like how they look, then go ahead and take them off. So this is what we want to see. This has been pruned, and some of them are a little bit past the horizontal, but not much. And these are tall trees, so definitely had to get a lift to prune these. This is what we don't want to see. Okay, and then as far as cutting the stubs or the boots, or what's left behind when you cut the frond off, it's the Goldilocks rule that has to be followed here. Don't cut it too close. Definitely don't cut it flush, but don't leave too long a stub. Cut it just right. This is too much. To me, this is not enough, although it's partly just a personal preference. And then just right. Look how pretty that looks. Don't shave or peel off freshly pruned frond bases. If you feel the need to pull them off, then wait until they have dried up and they can come off easily so that the trunk isn't damaged. I just thought I'd throw in a few shots here of my yard and my palms. And then moving on to insects. Okay, the best defense for insect management and disease management is a strong offense. So keep the plants as healthy as possible. Water them thoroughly once in a while. If they're established, they only need it once in a while if we haven't had rain, like every 3 to 4 weeks, but water them really thoroughly. Fertilize, prune, don't volcano mulch, and inspect them regularly to see what's going on. And also look for beneficial insects. So if you have one of these tools, that will help you a lot to see what needs to be seen. Okay, it's time for a pop quiz. What percentage of insects in the world are plant pests? Raise your hand if you think it's A. How about B? Raise your hand if it's C, 47%. Okay, what about D? Okay, well, the right answer is A. Only 4% of insects and mites in the world are plant pests. Good job. You got it right. Okay, the difference between insects and mites is their body parts and their legs. So mites and spiders have a head and a abdomen, just 2 body parts, and they've got 8 legs. All insects have, okay, that's probably not true. Okay, insects in general have 3 body parts, head, thorax, and abdomen, and they have 6 legs. And then there's the weirdos like centipedes and millipedes that we won't talk about. But the reason it matters is because it's important in managing them to know their life cycle and know different times when they are feeding on different things maybe, or when they are more susceptible to control measures. And they are categorized often by their mouth parts. So there's these 4 types. Piercing, sucking would be things like aphids, stink bugs. They have a mouth part that's like a needle, and they put that down into the plant, and they inject an enzyme that breaks down the plant tissue and liquefies it, and then they can suck it out. So they're feeding on the inside of the leaf. And this one on the left is feeding on the caterpillar. So some of these are good guys. And the symptoms that you're often going to see, the damage could be stunting, yellowing, honeydew, which is a sticky exudate that the insects put out after they feed. And mites, again, they're not insects, but they have, most of them have a piercing, sucking mouth part also. They generally like dry, hot weather, and you might see webbing when they're present, but it's the same look to the plant where it is, the color is stippled. They look like they've had juice sucked out of them. And sometimes you might have what's called bronzing, not so much on palms, but on other plants or on citrus fruits, for example. But these insects like aphids, mealybugs, scale, these are very common on palms. And there's some scale. Scale is an insect that crawls around when it's a juvenile, and then it builds this scale covering over itself to protect itself. And then it sits there and sucks the juices out of the plant. And it exudes the honeydew that I mentioned, and then sooty mold, which is a fungus, grows on that honeydew. The sooty mold doesn't infect the leaf, but it covers up the leaf, so it can't photosynthesize, and so it's kind of a double whammy on the plant, especially if it's a young plant, to have its juices being sucked out and also its photosynthesis being reduced. Okay, here's the famous snow scale or cycad scale. Super common in landscapes around South Texas. And again, if you can keep the plant as healthy as possible, you're less likely to have it. If you do have it, you need to get on controlling it right away, or it can kill the plant. Different insecticides or control measures would be used for different insects or mites, but I always start with the most environmentally friendly ones first, like insecticidal soaps, and then move on to other things. And for specifics, you could talk to your extension agent or where your chemical suppliers. And you can send samples in through the extension office to get a definite ID if needed. Okay, insects with chewing mouth parts, you can see the results of their damage very easily. Parts of the leaf are missing. And some of these would be cockroaches, which have actually more of a rasping mouth part. Grasshoppers, which will take the whole leaf. Most wasps, beetles, termites, and caterpillars. And you can see their chewing mouth part there. And then the results. And this is This is a caterpillar chewing on this palm. You can see that there's about 10 of them in that picture. You need to control it if it's on a young palm because they don't have enough leaves to fight it back. And I think the best control is BT, which is a bacteria. There's a lot of brand names of it. One of them would be dipel and others thuricide. The thing about BT though is that it breaks down in sunlight, so you need to spray it late in the day, and the caterpillar eats the BT. So you spray the BT on the leaf, caterpillar eats it, and then it messes with their gut and it kills them. It only kills caterpillars, but it kills any caterpillar. But you probably don't have things like monarchs are not going to be feeding on palms, but you do need to be aware of that. And then there's spongy mouth part, which is what a fly has. They also inject or put out an enzyme that liquefies the plant cell, and then they can sponge it up. And siphoning, which is what a moth and butterfly mouth part is like, where they are, they're not penetrating the plant, they're just going down into the flower and getting the nectar out. Here's some of the good bugs, the beneficials that are either going to eat the so-called bad bugs, or maybe they're going to lay their eggs in the bad bugs and kill them that way. So they're going to be predators or parasites of them. Lace wings on the bottom left, those are fairly common, and they are tremendous predators. Almost all spiders are good insect controllers. I can't think of any right now that are plant pests. Red wasp, up on the top left there, they will lay their eggs in caterpillars, and then as their young hatch, they eat the caterpillar. So you might want to do some things like planting things that will attract beneficials, and here's some of the ones that do. You can Google this. There are hundreds and hundreds of plants that attract beneficials. Sort of a general rule of it is that you want things that are blooming all the time to attract them. It's important to get the pest identified so you can control it. Collect a sample of the insect if you can, or if you can't see the insect, then get some of this typical symptoms, collect that and send that, bring that into the extension office, or you can take some pictures of it. You can also go to this great site, bugguide.net. And on the left there, you've got the drawings of the insect. Obviously you don't know what it is because that's what you're trying to find out, but you can look through those pictures and click on the general shape. That's why I like this site. You don't have to know what family it's in when you start out. So bugguide.net. Okay, moving on to diseases of palms. These are classified by it being abiotic, which is not, doesn't have a disease organism, and biotic. And for the biotic ones, there's the disease triangle, and you have to have all three parts: the susceptible host, the favorable environment, and the disease pathogen in order for the disease to develop. Cold is one of the things that's considered an abiotic disease. That's how plant pathologists categorize it, and this is from some freeze damage on Phoenix palms a few years ago. Leaf spots are pretty common on palms. Most of them are not especially harmful to the plants, depending on the level of infestation, but they will occur when the plant is nutrient deficient. So again, keeping your plants healthy. Plant that's deficient in nitrogen and or potassium will definitely be more susceptible to fungal infection that cause leaf spots. And then of course we have our high humidity. It's a great environment for leaf spots. They're often yellow or brown spots, and sometimes there'll be a brown spot with a yellow circle around it. Again, you can take pictures or take samples. Pick up diseased leaves if you see them. If it's severely diseased, you could cut them off the plant. Water early in the morning so that leaves don't stay wet overnight, and use fungicides if you need them. And I'll just show you a few examples. I know we're running out of time here. Graphiola leaf spot or false smut. It's not really that harmful, but it does look kind of nasty. Date palm lethal decline. It will kill date palms, all date palms, whether they're pygmy or full size. And you get discoloration of the older leaves first, or the dropping of all the fruit, and then discoloration of the older leaves. But the main diagnostic symptom is that when less than a third of the oldest leaves die, the central spear also dies. And this is in Phoenix and similar in sable palms. Of course, once that spear leaf dies, that's the end of the plant anyway. So for disease, you want to look for patterns in the landscape or site. Maybe take notes on, if you're taking notes on a calendar, you could write, when it rains, how much rain you're getting, things like that, just to keep track. And then you're going to want to provide that information if you send a sample in, and how much of the area or number of plants is affected. If you've got, 6 Washingtonias and 3 of them are infected, or they're all affected, but only maybe there's leaf spots on half the plant. Those are things to take note of. This is a site of diseases that are known to exist in Texas, and then it gives information about them. Plant Disease Handbook. And University of Florida is actually, to me, the best university for palm information. You can find all kinds of things. Great pictures and great guides to help you diagnose what's wrong. So palms, remember, are unique, and again, damage to leaves is a problem because they have so few leaves compared to their size, and they've only got one growing shoot. And here's some of the credits I'd like to mention for the photos, some of the photos. And that wraps it up with some coconut palms in Hawaii. Okay, I've got 4 minutes and 30 seconds for questions. Are there any questions?
We had a question from Deborah. She has a pygmy date palm that she planted, and she wants to know, it's struggling. She wants to know, is it susceptible to sea spray, salt spray?
Yes, date palms are susceptible to salt, somewhat. They're sort of medium susceptible.
What should she be doing to counter that?
Is she right on the water?
Yes.
Okay, I would say, well, make sure she's watering it with good water thoroughly every once in a while. When she waters, she wants to leach the salt down below the soil, below the root level. And if she can, plant something between it and the ocean water.
All right. Any other questions for Ginger before we let her go today?
No questions over here at the city. Thank you, Ginger.
You're very welcome.
Excellent, Ginger. Now it makes us want to go to Hawaii. So
thank you all for listening.
All right. So we want to thank you all for joining us today. And we just want to remind you that we have the lecture series on the second Friday of each month. And I'm trying to see if I can share this so that you can see it. Did that pop up for you?
Yes.
Okay, so our next lecture is actually on turf grass, and that'll be Michael Potter. He is CA from Conroe, and he's excellent on turf grass. He lived in Corpus Christi for quite a while, and so he's very gracious to offer that to us. Ray, are you there? Can you talk to the group a little bit about where they can find the recordings of this lecture series?
Okay, so yeah, currently you can go back and watch them from the Port Aransas Nature Preserve Facebook page. Under videos, you'll see them all there, and we're working on uploading them to our YouTube channel. So we'll post that on our Facebook page for and share that with folks. I guess if you don't have Facebook, then you'll be able to watch them there. But so we can share that with the master gardeners in those groups when we get them on YouTube.
All right. Well, we want to thank everybody today. I want to say special thank you to Ray Mooney from City of Port Aransas, and then who else do we need to thank? We need to thank Bill Green from the Texas A&M Forest Service and Ginger Easton Smith for helping us out today. And who else, Ray? Our other partner.
Sarah from
Sarah Cunningham.
National Estuarine Research Reserve.
National Estuarine Research. They've all been instrumental in helping to get all this done every month, and we hope that you're enjoying the lectures and hoping that the information is as useful to you as it is to all of us. So
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
That wraps it up. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend.